let's start with the training. Hope everybody have installed the Dialog Studio and tried out the samples, assignments, and whatever is taught in the previous sessions, right? Okay, so before we proceed, if anybody have any queries, please you can unmute and stop me and can ask me then and there, or you can ping in the chat window so that we can take it up in the end of the session. Okay, so coming to the topic. So before going to the container component, so let's try to understand about what a container is. In the previous session, already Sharath has explained, right, about all the basic elements in the JavaScript. But to display all the basic elements in your page, say suppose this is your previewer, which you can see in the screen. And if you see here, there are multiple elements and multiple items which are displayed in this page. But to assemble all these elements into a page, you need a container component. So basically what I'm trying to say is that within a container component, you can group elements, give them a structure on how those can be displayed in a page. Finally, that is what will be displayed in the structure you define. So basically, a container is something you can even call container as a layout, and a typical layout defines the visual structure of your user interface. Okay, so as I said, to assemble all the basic elements within a page, you need a container component. So HarmonyOS JavaScript SDK supports multiple inbuilt container components. So let's go through them one by one. Okay. Already you might have come across a few of the container components while you are doing your hands-on, like div, list, tabs, etc. So let's go through a few of them in detail now. Okay, so let's try out those in our previewer as well, so that we'll be clear about the component along with the attributes and styles, etc., whatever it is supporting. Okay. First component which we can check out is batch. This is a container component which is used to mark new events, mainly if the event requires user attention. So this is one good component which we can use to achieve it. So for better understanding, you can see here in the previewer the bubble which is displayed on the top right corner. That is the batch component. So in the interest of time, I have put some samples here so that we can go through them and try to understand them. Okay. Okay, coming to the batch component, this component supports only one child component within it. So you have to ensure there is one child component added and surrounded by the batch component. So if in case, if you keep multiple child components within batch component, then our framework will consider only the first one which is defined and tries to add the batch to that first child component. But anyway, for a good programming practice, ensure there is only one child component around which the batch component is enclosed. Okay, so coming to, there are two kinds of badges which can be supported. As you can see in this sample, you can either display a dot or you can display some count over here. And one more is there where you can display some text completely onto the badge. So let's go through the attributes which it supports. Okay, class anyway is to give the style details, and the style details, as we all know, is defined in your CSS file. And even you can define directly over here with this style attribute directly. But here in this particular example, this is defined in CSS. Okay, so here nothing much, only the style details are added, like width and the top margin. Okay, so coming to the next attribute, config. So basically this attribute is used to add the configurations of the badge. Configurations in the sense you can add the badge color, text color here. Here if you take this example, badge color is blue, text color is white, text size, badge size. There are some options which is provided. So you can refer to the documentation and try to add all of them. So basically this is used to provide some configuration items for your badge. In this particular example, okay, you can see here the badge color and text color are added. Okay, so you can try to change it and see. Okay, so I have changed the badge color, which you can preview in the preview. Like that, there are some more details which you can change. Okay, visible as the name itself says. This is used to decide on whether to display the badge or not. Count, to display the count details. And if you see here, there's one more attribute called max count. This will denote the maximum number of notifications which you can show in this particular badge. So if it is crossing this number, then it will put as 99 plus. You can change and see. So now it's changed to 59 plus, even though it is 100. Okay, and one more point over here is for the count attribute, the default value will be 0. So if you put it as 0, it means that it will not display any number. Instead, it will display the dot itself. So basically, if the count is 0, the framework will display it as a dot. Otherwise, it will display the respective number. Okay, same thing you can see here. Okay, and there is one more attribute called placement that we can use to position the dot badge. In this particular sample, it is positioned in the right top, which is the default value. But if you want to change it to right, or if you want to change it to left, basically if you want to change the position of this badge, then you can use the placement attribute. Okay, there will be some more attributes which will be supported, so you can go through the documentation. I will show in the end where exactly you can check it, and you can try out all of those attributes. Clear, right? So if you have any queries, please ask right now. Otherwise, let's move to the next component. Okay. Okay, let's move to the next container component, which is list. List, as the name itself explains, this is used to display the items as a list view, either in rows or in columns. Okay, so mainly this component provides a list container which represents a series of list elements which are arranged by default in columns and with the width which is defined by the user. So basically we use list to support presentations of data in multiple and in unified manner within a container. Like for example, you want to display some text or some images in a sequential fashion, then the first preference would be to use the list component. Okay. Okay, for the list component, the child component, two child components are supported. One is the list item, the other one is the list item group. Each of these we will learn in detail now. Okay, so before going to list item and list item group, let's check once the attributes within the list. And here the sample is already displayed, wherein we are displaying a list containing two items. If we go to the JS and see, we have defined one list structure wherein we have two items added to this particular list, and these are the items which we are trying to display in the user interface. Okay, I can add n number of items like this. Okay, if you see here, how many ever items I'm adding here, those many are getting displayed within the list. And coming to our HTML code, okay, the styles are defined here. Okay, these are the default styles. Okay, if you see here, I am adding the divider also as true, which means that after every list item, I need a divider to be added. And there are many, okay, style is all defined here. So there are many styling factors which I can apply to divider as well. See here in this particular example, I have given the height as 2 pixels. Like that, if you want more thinner divider or thicker one, you can adjust this particular height. So if you see here, the width has increased. And we can even give the color to this particular divider, and there are many more attributes which you can try out particular to the divider. Okay, so coming to the list itself, also there are all the universal attributes which you can find in the documentation. All of those you can try out. In this particular sample, I have just given the margin top so that it will not be very near to this badge component. Okay, so like that, there will be many other important attributes, like whether if you have a bigger list, then whether you need to display a scroll bar here, or if you have a bigger list and you are scrolling down up continuously, whether some items has to be cached in the memory so that when you're scrolling, the performance will be faster and the cached items can be displayed very fastly. And how much should be the cached count, and what should be the scrolling effect, and if you want to add animations to your scrolling effect, and adding indexers, and one divider part already we have checked here. Like that, there are many attributes, so you guys can try out offline. As I said, along with attributes, there are many styles also which you can add to the style attribute or else to your CSS. and try out. As I said, there are many style attributes. Apart from the universal style attributes, which are supported by all the components, there are few specific attributes, style attributes, which are very much specific to the list component. So those also you can find in the documentation. Like if you want to define some columns and rows specific to your requirement, have to define it, and the flex direction. Like that, many style things are there which you can try out offline. And if you are displaying text here, so you can even provide the text related stylings like font color, text size, all of that you can add and try out. Since we haven't mentioned anything here, so the default size and default font details will be taken. Okay, and even for the scroll bar which will be displayed, for that also you can define and add some stylings and try out. Like what would be the scroll bar color, what should be its width, like that. Okay, so coming to this example, as we have already seen, we have defined a list which we want to display in this particular page. So the same thing we are giving here to the first attribute, which will loop through these items, and each item's value we are displaying it to the giving it to the text element, and this text is what we are giving to the list item. So in each list item we are displaying the value from this list. So it's as simple as that. Okay, so with this you might have already understood what a list item is. List item is a child component which is used to display items within a list. So anyway, again to the list item, you can you have many attributes and styles through which you can customize the way the list item has to be displayed. And as I said before, if you're not giving those attributes, the default values will be taken. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the list item group. Okay, so you can see here. Okay, you can come back to here. So list item group, this is also, as I already told, this is also a child component of list, which is mainly used to group items within a list. So if you can see the sample, then you will understand. Say here, there is one list item which is grouped to this heading. Basically, you can group n number of items like that. So basically, there is one attribute called primary. Once you set primary to true to one of the list item within the list, so that is what will be displayed, that is what will be displayed when this particular group is collapsed. And there will be an arrow mark here in the previewer. This is not display coming up properly, but if you actually try in an emulator or device, this will be an arrow mark. So when you click on the arrow mark of the primary list item, then the other items within that grouped list will be expanded and displayed to the user. So for such use cases wherein you want to have one primary item and which will act as the main title for a group of elements, and to have an option to have collapse and expand, then you can go for list item group contain. Okay, so in this particular example, I have just added one group. So we can try out by adding multiple groups and see. Okay, so if you see here in the Java code, within data, I have created one empty list, and on in it, I'm filling that list item with some dummy data, like group 1, group 2, group 3. So we can try to fill up more items. So if you see here, I have now included 3 items over here, and those are all added to the list variable, which we are using here to loop through and display the elements. So the same for loop is used, which will loop through all the items within that list and give it to the list item component. So here is it. So the list from JS we are defining as list group over here, and the value of that, which is group plus I, means if I is equal to 1, this value will be group 1. So those values we are displaying here. So we are adding as 2 list items, one with primary true and one as a normal list item. So the one with primary 2, we are just appending some text and then adding the actual list value. So that's why this is displayed as primary with hyphens group 1. So on click of that, the other items within this item group will be expanded and otherwise collapsed like this. Okay, hope this part is clear. Okay, you can actually see in the emulator, the arrow mark will be displayed like this. Okay, so as I told before, most of the universal styles and attributes are supported to list item group as well. So all those we can try out different styles and different ways to define the list item group. Clear? And if you see here in this same sample, we can even check out how we are able to achieve this collapse and expand. So if you see here, the list item group supports few events like on group collapse, on group expand. In the previous sessions, we have already seen, right? So to define event callbacks, we can either use on or at also we can use followed by the event name. Okay. So now, since we have given the event here on group collapse, we are defining it to call a function called collapse from our JS. So we can go there and check what we are doing. Okay, over here. So if you see here, whenever I'm expanding or collapsing, we are displaying a toast over here. So that is because we are defining the event here and displaying a toast message whenever collapse or expand happens. So whenever collapse happens, we are printing a toast message of close with group ID. Okay. So there are few more events which are supported, like group click as well. So whenever you click on any group, you will get an event back here, using which you can add your functionality. Okay, so I think all of you are clear now with usage of list component along with its child components. So let's move on to the next component, okay, which is dialog. Okay, this is a simple component which is mainly used to display custom pop-up container. So we can try out here and see so that it will be easy. Okay, so you can define a dialog component using this tag. You can provide an ID to it. And the dialog component also supports only a single child component. So whatever you want to display in your dialog, you have to define and put it as a single component over here. And dialog component supports few attributes like draggable in the sense when this pop-up is displayed, this attribute will be used to decide on whether the pop-up can be dragged across the screen. So right now I have defined as true. We can try out and see. So how I'm attaching this here is I have defined a dialog with a particular ID just to attach it somewhere. So whenever this is collapsing or expanding, we will try to show or close this dialog. Okay, so in the collapse and expand methods, so whenever this particular list item is expanded, we will show a dialog. When it is collapsed, we will close the dialog. So mainly all of this you can try out in previewer itself. Once everything works fine, then you can go for emulator, because in previewer, viewing and checking will be very fast compared to emulator. Okay, so now as I said, when expanded, the dialog which we have defined with this particular ID, we are trying to get the DOM element over here using $element, and we are calling the inbuilt functions of the dialog. Mainly the show function will display the dialog in your user interface. So that is why it is displayed here. And since we have set draggable as true, so now I should be able to drag it anywhere across in this particular page. Right? And generally dialogs, whenever we click outside, the dialog will be closed. Not closed, actually cancelled. Okay, so here we have already seen when this is getting collapsed, we are closing the dialog. That also we can try. So the dialog is closed, and then only this event went to the actual list item. Okay, so this is a simple pop-up display. So this also supports many other attributes along with the universal attributes. So and styles. So please try out offline with different stylings and displaying some very good dialogue with lot of content. All of that can be tried out offline. Okay, so coming to the events supported by the dialog, already we have seen here, right? These are the functions supported like show, close and all. So whenever a pop-up is displayed, then there will be an event called show, which will be called like I told here. So you can try it out using on show and give your JavaScript method here. So whenever the dialog is displayed, you will get a function call to this particular method in your JavaScript, wherein you can add your functionality. Okay, this also the events also you all of you can try out offline. So I think there are multiple events supported like on show, on close or on cancel. So all of those please try out. Okay, so next move on to the next topic. Okay, let's try to understand the div component. So this, as all of you might have observed already, this is used many times in during our requirements. So mainly this component is a basic container which is mainly used as a root node of any page structure. Or you can say if user wants to group some content, then we can use this basic component called div. So if you see here in this particular page also, initially the div is itself used with some styling, wherein within this div we are grouping many elements or many components which we are displaying within the page. Okay, so this is one simple example. Let's see the styling structure of this. Okay, so this is one very important component, and div component supports many attributes, and it supports mostly all of the universal attributes also. So I suggest all of you offline, please go through all the attributes supported by div, so that when you are designing your use or implementing your user interface, this will actually help you out. Okay, so in this particular example, what we are doing is we have a div container which have some attributes whose width is 400 pixel, height is 100 pixel, and with some background color. Background color here we are giving as white. That's why it's merged to the actual page background. Okay, so within that parent div, we are defining some more div components, child components. So coming to color primary. So if you see all these child components, the first styling item is same, only the second styling item is changing. So which means this is common across all these child components, only the color we are changing, if you see here. Okay, so each of this parameter which we have defined here have some very specific meaning. I think there are many such attributes we cannot discuss here. These are very well documented in our API references in documentation. Please all of you go through them, it's very important. So for example, if you just see about justify content, this will actually explain on how the items are aligned across the main axis. Say suppose for this particular page, if you go to the container check style, the flex direction is column, which means all the elements within this particular div are displayed vertically in your page. So that will, the vertical axis would be your main axis. So now coming back to your actual styling, which is flexbox. Okay. So here we are mentioning justify content as space around, which means this particular parameter explains the framework that all the items within this particular tag should be aligned along the main axis of in a flex container. So space around this, there are multiple values supported here. Like you can do from start, you can do from end, like that. So say suppose there is one value here called flex end, which indicates that the items will be packed towards the end within the row. If you give flex start, and if there are only 3 items, they will be packed towards the starting of this particular layout, like that. Space, what we have given here is space around, which means the items are positioned with space before, between, and after the rows. So basically whatever space is available here, how those should be utilized to display your child components is what these parameters explains. So there are multiple options which you can try out. Okay, there's one more important attribute which is called flex wrap. Okay, flex wrap, if you see here, so this will explain on whether the flex items which are defined here are displayed in a single line, or if the items are exceeding the space, then those should be adjusted to the next line. So if flex wrap is no wrap, then it means that you should not, this component should not be wrapped, means all the child components should be displayed within a single line. So since we have provided here that these can be wrapped, means the items which are crossing this page will go to the next line. So these will be mainly adjusted in multiple lines. Like that, there are few more attributes which can be tried out. Okay, so coming back to our example. So here what we are doing is we are just having one element, parent element, and some child elements which we are displaying here. So around 7 elements we are displaying, and since it's of no wrap, all these are getting adjusted within this particular single line. Okay, so there is one more important attribute here, which is called display. I think we can see here. Yeah. So this is the attribute called display, which is an attribute for mainly for the div component. So display means that this indicates the type of the view box of this particular element. In the sense, you can display the items within this particular div component as a flex or as a grid. Yeah, as a flex or as a grid. The default value is flex. That's why, since here I haven't given any display attribute, so it has taken the default flex display option, and it's displaying as a flex layout. Flex in the sense it's a flexible layout. Flexible layout means it will be flexible enough, and whatever attributes user is giving, it will act accordingly. Okay, so with this example, you can, I think, understand how the flex display works. The other option which is available is to display them in a grid view. Grid we know, right? Kind of in a matrix structure wherein you will have rows and columns. In such structure, if you want to display your elements, then you can use your display attribute and give the value as grid. Then it will adjust the items in a grid fashion. Okay, so again, if you set the display as grid, there are many attributes which are specific to this grid display which you have to use. Say suppose if you see in this example itself, yeah, your main parent component have this grid parent style, and if you see the CSS here, you have multiple other options like grid template columns, grid template rows, gap. So let's come understand one by one. So coming to grid template columns. So this will, since this is template columns, this indicates the number of columns in the current grid layout. Say here you have given 2 values. So this means that this particular column has This particular grid has 2 columns. Same with rows. This particular grid has 2 rows. And there is some specific meaning for this, since you have given 35% here, which indicates that the first column occupies 35% of the total width which is allowed by your parent component. And the second component also occupies 35%, which is allowed by your parent component. So basically this indicates 2 things. First is the number of columns, and each column space it has to take, mainly the total width which each of this component has to take. Similar for the rows as well. Clear, right? So here in this particular example, I have indicated this as percentage, but there are many other options which you can try out. Like you can give the exact size, like might be if you want the first column item to take up 50 pixels, then you can just give as 50 pixels here. See, now this is adjusted to the size which is mentioned here. Okay, like that you can try out the other options as well. Okay, then coming to the gap. So this indicates, again, there are 2 attributes, one for rows and other for the columns. So this indicates the size of the gap between 2 consecutive rows or 2 consecutive columns. So basically this gap which you are getting here is because of this attribute. So if you want lesser gap, you can reduce this size. Otherwise, you can adjust the values based on your current requirement. Okay, so like that, there are few attributes. These are highly used, so I have put here. Few more attributes are there. Please go through them offline. Okay, so coming to the child elements, this part is simple. So again, as we have seen in the previous example, for all the child elements, one common styling check style we have given, followed by the specific styling. So grid child is common to everybody. So width, height, and radius we have given. So width and height, 100%, 100% means, so complete width and complete height, which is allotted to the parent, can be allotted to the child as well. And border radius of 8 pixel, because of which this borders have a cut over here. Okay, and specific, there are few more attributes which can be specific to each item within a grid. Few of them are row start, column start, means where exactly this particular child should be placed. Say suppose I am creating one child component which I have to place over here. Then I have to give row start as 1, column start as 0. Like that, there is a flexibility of where the particular or the current defined component, child component, has to be placed within a grid. And for each item, we have given a different background color as well. Okay, so to summarize, this is one basic component which can be used to group your multiple components. And coming to the most important attribute called display for this component, using which you can clearly mention how the child components within this particular component has to be displayed. We have 2 options called flex and grid. So as per your requirement, you can use the respective component. If you want to have some flexible layout or a layout with as a grid structure. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let me comment this so that page will be clear. Okay. The next container component is form. So mainly this component allows the content in input elements which can be either submitted or if you want to reset the selection. So these two options are provided by this particular component. I think this most of you might be knowing this in web browsers. This is mostly or mainly used in login pages, wherein you will enter your username, password, and submit them to those details to your server. So similar to that, here also you can provide your input details and submit those details. So that's a form wherein you can submit or reset the input selections. Okay, so anyway, all the styling factors and attributes are similar. We will not go much in detail. The specific events for this particular component are submit and reset. So if you see in this particular example, we are giving radio options to the user. User can select one of these and he can even enter some text. And once user clicks on submit, so this is the event which will be triggered, and on submit function will be called here. So wherein I am just displaying the selections given by the user. This is where the business logic can be placed. So if you click on reset, everything will be cleared off. I mean, all the selections by the user. So that's the main purpose of this particular element. Sorry, particular component. Okay, hope this is clear. Let's move on to next one. Okay, the next component which we will be studying is about panel. So the panel component is nothing but a slidable panel. So this kind of slidable component is inbuilt provided by the SDK. See, if you see here, let me close. When I click here, one slidable panel is coming from the bottom, which I can actually expand or I can close completely. So this is such a container component. So basically it provides a lightweight content display window with flexible sizes. Flexible sizes in the sense, if you see the mode attribute here, there are three options supported here: mini, half, and full. Since the mode is set to half, that's why when I click here, the panel is covering half of the page. So if I set it to mini, okay, so a minimal panel will be displayed, and the minimum panel height also I can set here using the mini height attribute. So since I have increased here, so now this panel is taking 150 pixels. The other mode is full, which is similar to this full page display. Okay, so hope this is clear. Okay. Okay, there is one more attribute called type, right? So here for a panel, there's one more attribute called type, which you can use. There are multiple options supported here also, like mini bar. Whatever we are seeing here is foldable one. Mini bar, there are some more options which you can try out. Okay, so and if you see here, there is one event size change also, which takes the call to your JavaScript, wherein you're changing the mode. Okay. Okay, so other universal attributes are also supported here. So many stylings and all can be tried out according to the requirement. Like you can give a background color to this, all this text stylings can be done, etc. Okay, so I'm not going in detail. All of this can be checked offline. Like whenever I'm clicking on this button, I'm closing the panel. So there is an inbuilt function already supported called .close, through which you can close the particular panel. So just get the DOM element and call the respective functions on that element. That's all. Okay, so next let's move on. Okay, this is okay, pop-up container. So mainly this component is used to display a pop-up to mainly offer instructions after a user clicks on something. And if you want to show some instructions to the user, like in this example, I'm clicking on this and I'm showing kind of information about something. So in such use cases, this pop-up component can be used. Clear? So I click on this, the pop-up can be closed. Okay, so there are some important attributes over here. Like if you take target, this will be the ID of the target element on which this pop-up is operating. Like in this particular example, if I'm clicking on this text, also this tooltip is displayed. That's because I have set the target to this particular text, which is a child component within this pop-up. And there are other attributes like placement, keep alive, placement in the sense where to position the pop-up, whether you want to keep it in the top. Here I have put top, so that's why it's coming in the top. If you want to display this pop-up here in the left side with an arrow indicating to it, then I think you have to give left over here. Like that, there are multiple options like top left, bottom right, etc. And coming to keep alive, so whether you want to retain this pop-up, I think by default this will be false, so that's why I have kept it to true. So true in the sense this pop-up does not disappear when user taps on other places, or if he switches the page and all, it will not disappear. So in such requirements, you can keep it as true. Otherwise, it will be false by default. Okay, whether it should be clickable. If this is false, then this won't be clickable. Since I have set it to true, now I can define on-click event as well to this particular pop-up, wherein I'm closing this pop-up. Yeah, if you see here, on click on this, I'm closing the pop-up using the inbuilt hide function. Okay, so like that, there are some inbuilt methods and events supported which can be tried out. Let's move on. Okay, next is stack. Okay, coming to this stack component, as you can see here, the stack have 3 child components which are displayed in this particular area defined. So by this, what we can understand is this component provides a kind of stack container where child components are stacked on top of each other. Like the first one will be displayed on top of that, second one will be displayed on top of the third one will be displayed. So those are basically stacked successively. In the sense, the later one overrides the previous one. Okay, so here here the first child component is this one, this blue area. So on top of that, the second child component, which is the green area, is displayed. On top of that, the third one, which is this light green, is displayed. So you can quickly have a glance here. So this is the parent. I have given border width of 1 pixel. That's why this border is displayed here. If we don't want the border, we can just don't give it. So if you see here, the border has disappeared now for the parent component. And then different styles for the child components. So this is the first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one. Okay, this is a simple one. Let's move on. Okay, the next one is the stepper component. Okay, in a preview it's not clear, but mainly this component provides a step navigator. So mainly if you see your mobile phones, startup screens and all, there will be multiple steps which will be given to the user, and user will be asked to read all of those steps, and once he finishes with the first step, he will click on next to move to the next step. Otherwise, he will click on back to go back to the previous step. So in such use cases, we can use a container component called stepper, wherein multiple steps are required to be displayed to the user to complete some particular task. Okay, so here the child component, if you see, for a stepper component, it's a stepper item. So in this particular example, I have 3 stepper items. Okay, so this first screen is my first stepper item, and when I click on next, the second stepper item will be displayed, wherein I have one text and one button. And click on next, the third stepper item is displayed, and I can go back to the previous items. Okay. So this supports multiple events actually. If you see here, to the stepper, there is on next and on back. So whenever you are going to the next page, then this particular event is triggered, wherein you can have your respective functionality. You can just have a glance here. Okay, this the parameter over here, this will have 2 attributes. One is index and one is pending index. If you see in this particular example, we are making use of pending index. Index in the sense, this indicates the current step, index of the current step. Pending index in the sense, this indicates the index of the next step. Say suppose for this particular stepper item, the index will be 0 and the pending index will be 1, which will be the index of the next item. Okay, like that multiple events are supported, like next, back, skip and all. So those can be tried out offline. And there is one inbuilt method supported, which is tried over here. Yeah, set right button. If I click on this, if you see, the next button is changed to skip. That is because, so whenever I'm clicking on this button, I'm getting the stepper DOM element, and I'm calling this inbuilt function called set next button status. This will set the status of the next button in this particular navigator. There are multiple options supported here, like normal, waiting, skip and all. In this particular example, I have used skip. That's why the skip text label, whatever label we are giving here, that will be displayed, and this is the actual functionality. Here you can mention what exactly you want. If in case I change this to waiting, sorry, yeah, when I click on this, since the status is changed to waiting, so the next item is changed to this loading part. So basically the next button won't be displayed and the progress bar will be displayed whenever the status is changed to waiting to this inbuilt function. So whatever skip I have used, this is displayed to allow users to skip all the remaining steps. So since I have done it in the last screen, nothing is there, but using this, you can skip all the next steps and go to the next page. So this is one inbuilt function supported by Stepper. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, next one is Swiper, which is very commonly used in many UI applications. Okay, so if you see here, okay, this is the Swiper component. This component provides a container which allows user to switch among child components through swiping operations. You can even have an indicator here to indicate the number of pages within this swiper component, and even on click of it, that particular component can be displayed. So this is one important component mostly used in most of the UI applications. So coming to the attributes. Okay, here some important attributes only we can discuss. The first one is the indicator. Since it is set to true, the default indicators are displayed here. If you set it to false, there won't be any indicators, just user can only swipe and traverse through the screens. So there are many other attributes which are supported here, like autoplay, wherein these screens will be swiped automatically within a particular given duration, which you can, that interval also can be set through interval attribute. And there is one more attribute called digital. So if you set it to true, then actually numbers will be displayed 1, 2, 3 and all. Since here it is false, the dots are displayed. Loop to true means this can be looped. Basically after third screen, if you still swipe, the first screen is displayed. So it's a circular loop. Like that, there are many attributes which can be tried out for the swiper. Okay, so in this particular example, it's quite simple, wherein I have 3 screens which are displayed in a swiper, and I have given some buttons. Say suppose I click on swipe to, I'm moving to third screen using some inbuilt functions. We can see that. Yeah, there are some inbuilt functions. For example, if you want to directly swipe to some particular page, so you can give that index and call the swipe to function. Some more are there, show next, show previous, which you can try out offline. Okay. Okay, there is one more important component called tabs. Let me show you that. Okay, before going to the previewer, let's understand what are tabs. Mainly this component is used to provide a tab container. As you can see here. Yeah, as you can see here, there is a tab container which is placed in the top of the page. So for such user interface, you can use the tabs component. Mainly this will have 2 child components. One is tab bar and tab content. So this tabs element can wrap one tab bar and one tab content. So it can at most have, as I said, only one tab bar and one tab content. And if you can see in this particular example, within a tab bar, I have given around 5 tabs. And on click of each tab, each component within the tab content will be displayed. So there will be 5 components defined within the tab content. So those will be displayed. So for such purposes, we will be using tabs. Clear, right? So, and this supports one event called change. So basically, whenever any tab is changed, this particular event will be triggered. Okay, hope this is clear. And the tab bar also we already discussed. Mainly this is used to provide some defined area to display the tab labels. So by default, all of these are arranged horizontally. If you want to arrange them vertically, then there is an attribute, vertical, false, or true, through which you can adjust. By default, it will be horizontal. Okay, tab content, as I said, for each tab, what should be the content that gets displayed will be defined under tab content. Clear, right? So here also some few attributes will be provided, like scrollable true, wherein you can inform framework whether this page can be scrollable or not. Okay, so I think most of the container components I have covered here. Okay, so you can actually try out this in actual emulator also. As I said, any UI page, first you can try out in previewer, as viewing and operating will be very faster here. Then once everything looks good, you can go back to your emulator and try them out. So in emulator, the pages will be displayed like this. So with this particular example, where tabs are displayed, it is like this. Okay, so in this particular tab, we have displayed some container components like list, stack, and all. I think offline you guys can go through and try them out. Okay, before stopping the session, let me show you where exactly you can find all these details in our documentation. Okay, as last time Sharath also have showed, go to the API references. This URL is also provided in multiple PPTs. So go to the references URL and then go to JS API references and to the first drop down, wherein you can find separate sections for JavaScript and TypeScript. Go to JavaScript components. Within that, you can find both basic components and container components. Basic components last time already we showed. All the basic components listed over here. Our today's session topics, which are container components, are listed over here. So you can go through this and try out most of the components which we have discussed today. And there are some universal attributes which can work for most of the components. So all of them are also listed separately. Please all of you go through them as well and try out for your components. So within the same page where I have showed, in common section, those will be there. So these are also important, wherein all universal attributes, universal events like click event will be supported by most of the elements and most of the containers. All such global events or styles, attributes, universal methods, all of them are listed here. So please go through them offline and try to understand them. If any queries, please get back to us. Okay, I think that's all for today's session. If any queries, please go ahead and ask now.